Hundreds of thousands of people are working without power this morning after deadly storms ripped through part of the country.
There we go.
80-mile-an-hour winds toppled trees in upstate New York. Schools in the region are closed today. In the Midwest, more than 60-mile-an-hour gusts tore roofs from buildings and knocked over trees. Michelle Miller is in Detroit, Michigan, where strong winds fueled a deadly fire. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning. This is what people are waking up to. Winds so powerful, they took down 3-story trees. This one landing just between 2 homes. It even took out part of the sidewalk. More than 670,000 people are without power, and the head of the largest power company says this is the worst weather event for outages he has ever seen. Winds whipped the Midwest Tuesday, blowing roofs off of buildings and ripping trees out of the ground. 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts swept through the Detroit area, knocking out more than 3,000 power lines, demolishing storefronts and uprooting trees. This one even lifted the back of a car into the air. The winds fueled a fire that tore through a Detroit apartment building. 5 people died. 4 were hurt.
We had people jumping out the windows in the back, and fire was being driven through the building by the wind. And so it was a horrendous fire to fight.
I heard this big crack and a boom.
Brad Carpenter's house and car were crushed in Kalamazoo. The Michigan Wolverines men's basketball team's plane was blown off the runway at Willow Run Airport southwest of Detroit. Coach John Beeline says some of the players have minor cuts and bruises.
That game tomorrow has still a lot of meaning, but certainly our kids will look at it much differently.
Michigan wasn't the only state swept up in the wind. Next door in Chicago, 55-mile-per-hour winds broke a building window, showering the street below in glass and smashing this car windshield. And strong gusts made driving a truck nearly impossible. West of Indianapolis, this armored Brinks truck flipped over, killing the driver. In Toledo, Ohio, a tractor trailer tipped on its side, skidding along an interstate bridge. Another careened off of a highway in Wisconsin.
You've got to slow down so that way you don't put yourself in a bad situation. The worst thing that can happen is your truck gets blown over.
Residents of Onaway, Canada, were left perplexed when they awoke to find their water supply had been turned a bright pink color after something went wrong at the water treatment plant. Showers, tap water, and toilets were all affected by the strangely colored liquid, which the town council ensured wasn't toxic and simply came as a result of a malfunction which caused potassium permanganate to get into the reservoir. Potassium permanganate, also known as potassium salt, is a chemical disinfectant used to remove iron and hydrogen sulfide from well and wastewater. The Onaway Town Council said that during normal line flushing and filter backwashing, a valve was stuck open, allowing potassium permanganate to get into the sump reservoir.
Our water became pink.
So this is what it looked like yesterday?
Yesterday at 4:30. As the night wore on, more and more people were saying they had pink water.
This morning when I ran the tub to give them a bath, I immediately shut that down. Still a little pink. At the time, the town hadn't released anything to let us know if it was safe, so of course we avoided it.
We do a weekly flush with this, have done it for years and years, and nothing like this has ever happened before. I offer a sincere apology that we didn't get something out there at least to say your water is pink.
It turns out 2 separate faults in Southern California really aren't separate after all. A new study discovered the Newport Inglewood and Rose Canyon faults, the majority of which are just off the coast of Southern California, are really just one continuous fault system, and it's capable of producing an up to 7.4 magnitude earthquake. That puts the Newport Inglewood and Rose Canyon fault more on par with the famous San Andreas fault in terms of predicted earthquake strength. Even though we witnessed the San Andreas Fault trigger a devastating earthquake in Los Angeles via Hollywood magic in 2015, the last major quake in that region actually occurred in 1857. Researchers investigated part of the San Andreas Fault that runs north of Los Angeles and found that large magnitude earthquakes occur on average there once every century. And the U.S. Geological Survey found the fault could be overdue for another. We're well past the 100-year mark, and the USGS says there's a 16% chance an earthquake with at least a magnitude 7.5 will occur in the area within the next 30 years. The last major earthquake to strike along the Newport Inglewood and Rose Canyon fault zone was in 1933. It was a magnitude 6.4.
A Cairo slum. Probably not the first place you'd look to find ancient relics, but on Thursday, this was the scene of one of Egypt's most important ever archaeological discoveries. Locals looking on as a forklift extracted this 8-meter statue submerged in groundwater. If archaeologists are right, the separate pieces depict Ramses the Great, the most powerful and celebrated pharaoh of ancient Egypt, living and ruling 3,000 years ago and known by his successors as the Great Ancestor. It's in this part of modern-day Cairo that his temple stood, in the ancient city of Heliopolis. Before restoring it, experts will have to dig up the remaining pieces. If it is Ramses, the discovery could be a boost for Egypt's ailing tourism industry, which has suffered repeated setbacks since the uprising that toppled autocrat Hosni Mubarak in 2011. Many here hope a discovery like this could bring back travelers and their foreign currency. 3 millennia after he died, Ramses may still have things to do for his country.
The Great Barrier Reef isn't doing so great. Australia's government just said the reef is having a major bleaching event for the second year in a row. Last year, the same thing killed off 22% of its corals. Bleaching happens when corals get stressed from rising water temperatures. The animals purge their algae and are left completely white. An aerial survey showed the effects of climate change have now reached the central part of the reef, which remained relatively untouched in 2016. A bleaching event won't necessarily kill corals, but it does make them more vulnerable, especially when they happen back to back. The corals don't have time to recover. Australian officials are urging governments around the world to stand by the Paris Agreement and reduce greenhouse gas emissions to protect the reef. The Marine Park Authority will take another survey next week to assess over 1,000 other reefs along the Great Barrier Reef.
The nuclear accident on March 11, 2011 have displaced tens of thousands of people from Fukushima Prefecture. At its peak, over 164,000 people evacuated from their homes. 6 years on, still half are displaced, and many are still living in makeshift temporary housing. Decontamination continues in various towns and cities, while the government is planning to gradually open up these areas for residents to return. Takayuki Kanno was a farmer in Itate village, one of the villages where restrictions are to be lifted on March 31st this year. He welcomed the news, but not with an open arms.
I think it's a good thing, but there's nothing else I can say.
Kanno said lifting the restriction does not mean that the troubles have been fixed.
There's a lot I could say. We could talk all day about this. But I don't think the young people will come back to this town. I have a son, and he decided to leave here for good.
Over the years, fields have become unsuitable for farming, many of which are now used for solar panels. An irony, a village once known for its quality beef resorts to production of clean energy after being contaminated from the nuclear accident.
6,000 people used to live here. I expect only a third of those will be willing to come back. 2,000 if we're lucky.
A survey showed that less than 30% of residents in Itate and surrounding villages said they want to come back. Many have decided to restart elsewhere. People, especially those with young children, are worried of possible radiations in areas that had not been decontaminated, such as the forests and mountain areas. Moreover, farmers feel that it will take years until they can salvage their farms to a sustainable businesses.
Cosa succederebbe?
The provocative pontiff is at it again, this time signaling that he's open to allowing married Catholic men to become priests. The comments coming from an interview with Germany's Die Zeit newspaper, in which Pope Francis said that the lack of Catholic priests was, quote, an enormous problem, and suggested that he'd consider changing the celibacy rule for priesthood eligibility. The Pope expanded on the idea, saying the option would let men who are already married be ordained priests, but men who are already priests would not be allowed to marry. The Catholic Church does allow some married men to be ordained priests. Protestant priests, for example, can stay married to their wives after they convert to Catholicism. And Eastern Catholic churches also have married priests. But the Roman Catholic Church is traditionally more strict. Pope Francis, however, has taken several other more lenient positions during his tenure. In 2014, he surprised many when he said the Church could be more open to same-sex unions. In 2015, he announced that as part of the Year of Mercy, Catholic priests could forgive abortions. And just last month, the Pope suggested that it was better to be an atheist than a hypocritical Catholic.
But attorneys general in at least 4 states announced Thursday they will try to block President Trump's new travel ban in court. And they are pushing for the temporary restraining order that halted the original order to remain intact. Now, just to remind you of just how we got to this point, last month, a federal judge in Washington, James Robart, issued an order temporarily blocking the first version of the ban. Now, Robart's ruling was then upheld by a federal court in California, which led the president to issue a new order on Monday. On Thursday, Washington Attorney General Bob Ferguson said there are still constitutional problems with the revised executive order.
These pictures, uploaded to social media, show the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces close to ISIL's Raqqa stronghold. They've been advised by U.S. Special Forces, but now they'll receive more direct American support. 400 Marines have arrived in the country, ready to set up artillery positions. From 32 kilometres away, they can hit ISIL targets and clear the way for a full-on offensive due to start in weeks.
We are going to prepare to liberate the city of Raqqa. This is an important task that has to be accomplished because liberating that city is going to severely damage the enemy's prospects. It has a tremendous amount of symbolic importance. It's also a major command and control node for their external operations.
The Americans are pulling together local forces to throw a net around Raqqa to kill or capture as many militants as possible. This, they hope, will decimate ISIL and prevent its regeneration elsewhere.
Once you get Raqqa and Mosul, basically ISIS is no longer a military threat. Now, they're still a threat because, as we've seen what they've done in Afghanistan this week, they're still going to be a threat you're going to have to deal with, but it's not going to be a major military threat to the integrity of Iraq or to Syria.
The increase in U.S. troop numbers doesn't indicate a change in U.S. policy in the region under President Trump. The U.S. military insists the Marines are in Syria for a temporary period, but there is no fixed timescale. Meanwhile, President Trump, who said on the campaign trail he had a secret plan to defeat ISIL, has received recommendations from his military leaders on how to defeat and decimate the group. Those recommendations may change depending on the outcome in Raqqa. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, Washington.
More provocation from the rogue nation of North Korea as new reports surface that Pyongyang is preparing for its next nuclear test, days after launching 4 missiles. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live from London. All right, Greg, what is the latest that we know about these so-called preparations now by North Korea?
Yeah, concerning stuff, Shannon. The reports come from a reliable U.S.-based North Korea think tank that we have used extensively in the past. They are looking at satellite imagery just taken over the past 24 hours or so, and they are seeing activity, as we have seen in the past, at a site in North Korea where testing has occurred, a sign, in their words, that Pyongyang could conduct a new nuclear test at short notice. The regime of Kim Jong-un has detonated 2 devices last year. There were 3 prior to that, each increasing in capability, each also working at building up the storehouse of nuclear material. The regime is now capable of building something like 25 bombs, according to experts. This is the testing, as you noted, of missiles continues, that aimed at carrying a nuclear warhead. In addition to the ones that were launched this week, there were a dozen ballistic missiles last year. Missiles getting closer to hitting the United States. All of this activity, Shannon, banned by the United Nations.
A man suffering from mental health problems has been arrested after attacking people at random at the main train station in the city of Dusseldorf late Thursday. The 36-year-old's rampage resulted in a large-scale response by the city's police. He was arrested while trying to escape by jumping off an overpass near the train station. The man is in the hospital receiving treatment for serious injuries.
We've arrested that person and have the axe. At the moment, the whole station is closed. All passengers were escorted outside. We're searching the whole station and all platforms because we're not sure the attacker acted alone. We think so, but we're not absolutely sure. We're still searching.